Hope in Darkness is a podcast that addresses sensitive topics, including torture, abuse, and human rights violations. Listener discretion is advised. About 2 weeks since Josh Holt arrived in an infamous Venezuelan prison, he started to be able to communicate with his fellow inmates. He was able to sneak notes to and from his wife, Tammy, and made contact with the men in the cell next to his. One of them asked if Josh's family knew where he was.
And I said, no, they don't know I'm here. And he said, would you like to call him? And I said, would I like to call him? Of course I would like to call him. 100%, yes. He said, okay, at night, when all the guards go to sleep, I'll pass you a phone and you can talk to him.
The hours ticked by even slower that day. Josh waited, pacing in his cell, willing time to go faster.
I remember the night finally coming, and he finally passed me his phone, and he said, watch out for the guards. Make sure the guards can't see you.
Josh couldn't believe it. He dialed home for the first time in weeks.
And the phone wouldn't connect. It just wouldn't work. And I was devastated.
I'm Becky Bruce, and this is Hope in Darkness, Episode 6, Paging Mama Bear.
For Laurie Holt, the worry really began the day her son decided to travel to Venezuela.
They think that Josh is a spy.
I promise you, there's going to be a day where you and I are going to think of this as a distant memory.
I just want my boy back.
In this episode, you'll meet Laurie Holt, Josh's mom, who served a 2-year mission of her own to get the Holts out of El Helicoide and safely to Utah. More after the break. Laurie Moon grew up in Pocatello, Idaho, the only daughter in a family with 3 sons. She met Jason Holt at the drive-in movies when he stood in front of her and she kicked his leg to get him to move out of the way. Jason knew that day he would marry her.
She was my best friend, but she was, I'd say she was one of the best mothers a kid could ask for. So she truly was a remarkable mom for her kids.
I love those big bear hugs that she would always give, and that's why we always call her the mama bear. You don't mess with mama bear, you don't mess with mama bear's kids. And that's who she was.
Josh and his brother Derek knew their friends would be loved and embraced by Laurie too.
She was so open and just so happy, and she didn't know you were getting a hug. Didn't matter.
The family moved from Idaho to Utah when the kids were very young because of Jason's work as a computer programmer. The 2 boys, Derek and Josh, and 2 girls, Jenna and Katie, kept the Holt family hopping.
We're a lot of fun when we're all together, I think.
I asked if the kids gave him any trouble.
None of my kids gave me trouble.
They're all perfect angels.
Yeah, they had their mom to deal with. That happened.
He just doesn't know things because my mom had to deal with everything.
We've always been... There's always been a lot of laughter at our house when all the kids are together. They feed off each other. I got some funny dang kids.
It was hard to find that laughter in the summer of 2016 after Jason and Laurie learned their second child, Josh, was in government custody in Venezuela. It was hard for Derek to see what his mama bear went through.
She hit rock bottom pretty bad when Josh was gone, but what parent wouldn't?
At the time, Josh was one of about 20 other American citizens who had been imprisoned by a hostile foreign power, countries like Iran and North Korea. We don't have an exact number because the government keeps the information classified. But for their loved ones at home, there's a sense of hopelessness. Who do we talk to? How can we help?
There's no book. It's all trial and error and learn as you go. Learn to fly or learn to swim or sink. It's one of those things.
The Holts started making phone calls and did what they could to figure it out. Without fail, every single person involved pointed to Laurie Holt as the driving force behind those efforts. And somehow, she connected with the right people.
We rattled every cage we could, and we had some good contacts throughout the country and throughout the world, really.
In fact, Laurie had found an inside line to the prison, one Josh himself laid the foundation for as a missionary in Everett, Washington.
This lady in Washington, her cousin ended up being a guard in the prison that Josh was being held at. He had stomach cancer, and she funded his treatment. And so, besides being cousin, he kind of owed her. And so, we got information from him, from inside the prison, that the embassy couldn't get, nobody else could get.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But she and Jason couldn't talk to Josh himself to find out how he was doing. Then, Laurie became the family's face and voice on TV and radio. Starting July 6, just days after she learned about her son's arrest, Laurie took to the airwaves.
I did not think that this would happen.
At the Holt home in Riverton this evening, a lone sign sits in the window. Inside, signs of a young man whose absence is felt every day.
I just want my boy back.
Putting Mama Bear out there for the public was a very conscious choice.
Emotions play a big part in media. And so we thought it'd be best to put her front and center, put the crying mom. Let's tug on the heartstrings.
This home will continue to feel a bit empty, and she just can't bring herself to go into his room.
When I go in there, I can smell him, and it's too hard to smell him and know that he's not here.
This mother will stay by her phone, hoping the next phone call that comes will be good news, and that her son is finally coming home.
I just need it to be over.
And that worked for a while, but then after that, she just knew her stuff.
People don't know what really happened until you come to our household and you saw the notebook that my mom had with all the business cards, just pages and pages of information. She's talked to people that most people in their lifetime would never reach to the top. She had Senator Hatch's cell phone number. She had Mia Love's cell phone number.
Representative Mia Love was the Holt's congresswoman at the time. The daughter of Haitian immigrants, she served as mayor of a nearby city before moving on to Congress.
Laurie Holt was scary to me, in a sense.
Congresswoman Love was one of Laurie's very first phone calls.
I want to explain what that means, is that most of these situations, you look at them and you think, this couldn't happen to me. This is not something that can happen to me. This happens to other people. But Laurie Holt was, in essence, the mother next door. This hardworking, involved mother, active in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She was just this ordinary mom that all of a sudden is fighting for the life of her son. And it was scary to me because instead of me saying, that couldn't, these are things that happen to other people because of situations, I found myself saying that can happen to me also. What would I want? If that were me, what would I want my representative to do?
That phone call changed both women's lives.
It became a friendship. And she knew that if she called my personal cell phone and I saw her number come up, that at any time of day or night, middle of the night, even if I were on the floor voting, I'd run out and pick up that call.
Representative Mia Love released this statement saying, in part, "Today I personally call on President Maduro to stop playing games, give political prisoners due process, and to release Josh Holt."
And it just seemed like it was fairly simple at first because it just seemed as if, there was no reason for this young man to be in prison. And we knew that Venezuela was in a horrible state, but at the very beginning, we thought, okay, we'll just be able to get him a trial. And as soon as he gets the trial, it should be fine. And it turns out it was not okay. That when you're dealing with a country that has a corrupt regime that is starving their own people, it was a lot more difficult than we thought.
The two women encouraged each other and tried to stay optimistic.
She was relentless. Her engaging personality, her determination, like I said, she was the sweetest person, but scary in the sense that I saw myself in her. She made it. She was so compelling that she made her member of Congress and her senator 100% committed to getting Joshua out. And I just kept saying to her, we are not going to give up until he comes home.
Senator Orrin Hatch, who retired after 42 years in office, started doing regular video updates about the case on YouTube.
But at this time, I ask you to join Elaine and me in remembering Josh, his lovely wife Tammy, his parents, Laurie and Jason, and the Holt family and friends in your prayers.
Jason watched his wife with a sense of pride.
She grew so much. So much. I mean, I'm impressed at what she was able to accomplish.
The family was able to get legal representation for Josh and Tammy in Venezuela. But navigating the legal system there was not easy, nor was it cheap.
We had some great fundraisers.
We have a blend tech, we have a fire pit.
The kitchen table they once all sat around is now filled with items to auction off for mounting legal fees. Same with the front room.
This is just all raffle items.
Josh's friends pitched in too.
Good afternoon. It's with a heavy heart that I'm posting this video, and I'm really doing so to ask for your help.
They took to Facebook and YouTube to plead for donations to a GoFundMe account set up by Josh's sisters, Jenna and Katie.
If you can please donate anything, we would really, really appreciate it. Please share this video with your friends and loved ones on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, any way that you can. And please use hashtag #JusticeForJosh.
It raised nearly $25,000. It wasn't nearly enough.
Yes, we spent a lot of money. I think we spent quite a bit more than my family knows we spent.
The constant attention from local and national media was intense.
Yeah, our house got turned upside down because I was living here at the time. News people coming, people sitting in front of the house, watching the house, trying to get, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And yeah, it was just not fun. It was just every day thinking, when are we going to get Josh back? How is he going to get him home? Yeah, I don't know. It was crazy.
Laurie knew it was important to keep talking about her son, to keep granting interview requests. The more she learned about his health and the conditions of El Helicoide, the more she fought to keep the spotlight on the family's story.
For us, it's just continual bombs lowering all the time.
The entire thing was wearying.
I remember feeling powerless to help my best friend, but feeling, and I hope you'll forgive me for saying this, but feeling worse for your mom.
Josh's friend, Caden Hansen, remained in close contact with the Holts, in part so he could help translate messages from Tammy's mom or news from Venezuela.
We did the things that you can do, right? Like we brought food a couple of times. We'd go to see them. They live across the street from the church that we attend. And so it was really easy after church to just walk over and just say, hey, how you guys doing? Do you need anything? Is there anything we can do? But to see her in front of me just like crying and just having a hard time, it was, oh my gosh, it was so hard.
Another friend, Quinn Alsop, helped shoulder the translating load.
There wasn't enough information coming in to what we needed to know to figure out what to do. That was the problem. And so I remember those first couple of weeks, it was not every single day necessarily, but several days a week, talking to your mom, having me translate phone calls or WhatsApp messages or emails, articles. Whenever I would talk to her, it was pretty much always about, what new information do we have now and how do we use that to help us?
He and Caden couldn't take a break from what was going on. Between helping Laurie translate and just living their lives, Josh's absence was ever present.
People would always ask, how's Josh? And it was great because you felt like, at least I'm doing something, I'm telling the story, right? And I'm getting the word out there, and the more support it can only be a good thing. But then it was also like really hard because there are a lot of times when it wasn't great news.
It was really hard to have to tell it over and over with no end game. There was nothing, there was no, he just has to wait his time. It was just frustrating because even at that point, we couldn't even say that.
Like, even if they had said, he's got to do a year, he's got to do 2 years or something like that, it would have been like, we would have at least had a time frame. But and obviously the only really good news is that he's coming home, and we didn't get to say that and everything else for so long.
Then, the family got a text message that would change everything. That's after this. Hope in Darkness is supported by Grubhub. I like being able to support local restaurants, even if I'm not able to visit them in person right now. Plus, it gives my family a little bit of a break from my cooking. The Grubhub app makes it easy to find the food I crave with a $10 perk on every order to help me fuel my next family game night. I can search by cuisine, restaurant name, or even menu items, and the app helps me filter the results to get to what I really want. And the contact-free delivery and curbside pickup options help me keep my family safe while I support my friends who work at those local eateries. Just for Hope in Darkness listeners, if you download the Grubhub app, you'll get $10 off your order of $30 or more every day from participating restaurants. That's $10 off your order of $30 or more every day from participating restaurants. So download the Grubhub app today and get $10 off your order of $30 or more. By the summer of 2016, Venezuela's economic crisis had extended to cell phone networks. In April, 2 months before Josh arrived, the country's 2 largest mobile carriers suspended all international calling. They were millions of dollars in debt to overseas providers, and the government wouldn't allow them to increase rates to recoup any of that loss. This is the reason why Josh couldn't get through when he tried to call home on that borrowed cell phone just about 2 weeks after his arrest. He was crushed.
And I tried to get a hold of the other guy on the other side of the wall, and he wasn't talking back and forth to me. And so finally he came back after about 15 minutes and asked for his phone back, and I told him that it wasn't working. And so he said, sorry, I've got to hide it. I got to go. We'll talk tomorrow. I was thinking, no way. I was this close. After being in here for 2 weeks, I was that close to just being able to call my mom, call my dad, call my family, tell them exactly what was going on.
Josh didn't know what his family did or didn't know at that point, but he figured at the very least they had to know something was going on because he hadn't been in touch. He knew his mom especially would be worried.
The next day, talking to this kid again, and he said, you can text her, but you can't call.
That night, that's what he did.
And I just said, Mom? And I sat there, waited and waited, and finally got a reply back, and she said, who is this? And I said, it's Josh.
Laurie and Jason Holt had been through a rough couple of weeks by then. They didn't recognize the number, and they couldn't trust that it wasn't some kind of cruel trick. They waited to respond because they needed to think of something they could ask that only Josh would know.
Josh had this old truck, his old red Mazda B2000 that I drove in high school, and we called it the burrito. And we text back and we made him, said, if this is Josh, what was the name of your truck?
And I said, the burrito.
And only people that knew that was my family. So we knew that it was him.
And she replied, oh my gosh, Joshy, how are you? I love you. I miss you. And from that point on, I started realizing that she knew what was going on.
Communicating with the outside world was a lifeline for both Josh and his mom.
We started talking back and forth, and she was just asking the normal mom things. Are you okay? Are you getting food? Are you getting water? And so I told her kind of my situation in that prison.
He left out some of the details, like the bathroom situation and the scant availability of food and water.
I know who my mom is. I know how worried she gets. I know how much she fights for us. And in my mind, I thought, okay, I don't think that she's going to be able to do anything for us right now. So let's just tell her that everything's going okay. And I just told her, I was like, yeah, everything's going fine. They give me water every now and then, and they give me food a couple times a day.
Laurie already knew some of what Josh wasn't saying. Remember, they had found a way to keep tabs on the goings-on at El Helicoide, in part through people Josh met when he served his mission in Washington state. She told her son about all the work she and the family had been doing to try to get Josh and Tammy out of prison. She told him about all her news interviews and the contacts she'd made with high-ranking officials. He told her a little bit about his health problems. They exchanged I love yous.
Then I had to give the phone back.
The 5 or 10 minutes they'd spent exchanging text messages lifted Josh's spirits. And it had a similar effect on his family. Derek recalled his mom crying happy tears for the first time since she found out Josh was taken.
For some reason, our family, like when mom would lose it or any of the girls lose it, the rest of us lose it. I don't know what it's like a domino effect. Like mom starts crying, and then one of the girls, and then it moves on to the boys. It's just like a domino effect every single time.
She even talked about that on a local news report.
The family has now hired a lawyer in the country and a few days ago finally spoke to their son by phone.
It was a tearful conversation back and forth.
Soon, they figured out that while Josh couldn't call out, he could receive calls from the U.S. They learned to wait for his text messages, to know when Josh had borrowed a phone and that it was okay to call. They couldn't always get through. Cell service was spotty in Venezuela, and the walls of the prison were thick.
I remember mom sitting there trying numerous times, like 5, 6, 7 minutes of just calling nonstop. And finally, we got through. And then everyone would hurry and come and talk.
The communication wound up being a mixed blessing. It was great to hear Josh's voice. But it also reminded both Josh and the family of where he was.
I don't know if it was super helpful or if it was something that made those times harder. Because it was super nice to talk to my family. It really was. But at the same time, it was also very hard to talk to them. After I hung up the phone, I had to continue doing whatever it was that I was doing.
It kept my mom going for sure, hearing his voice. Because when she didn't hear his voice, she was a mess. She could not handle not talking to him, not knowing if he was okay or not.
It's tough for all of us, but I think it was harder for Laurie. She's the mom. I had double duty. I had to bring Josh up, and then I had to try to bring her up. And it was exhausting. It really was.
My biggest fear is that I'm not going to get him back. That if I do get him back, is he going to be alive? And that is just tearing me up inside right now.
Next time on Hope in Darkness.
And that's when I found out that he was one of the top 10 most deadliest people in Venezuela. And I'm sleeping maybe a foot away from him.
Hope in Darkness is written and produced by me, Becky Bruce. Additional producing and editing came from Nina Ernest. Sound mixing by Trent Sell. Our executive producer is Cheryl Worsley. Original theme composed by Michael Bondmiller. Additional voice work provided by Rebecca Cressman and Alex Curie. Special thanks to Josh and Tammy Holt and their family for sharing their experiences and story. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hope Darkness Pod or online at hopedarkness.com. And your feedback is always helpful. Drop us a rating or review wherever you listen. Hope in Darkness is a KSL podcast.